Hello, Kyle. How you doing today?
Good. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm good, thanks.
That's good.
So today we're going to talk about the DoD's SPRS reporting requirement, the Supplier Performance Risk System. I thought that would be helpful information to share with our defense industrial base clients. So the SPRS, Kyle, what is it? Can you just explain a little bit, give a high-level explanation of what the SPRS is, please?
So SPRS is a system hosted by DoD. It captures the NIST 800-171 DoD assessment methodology score, along with where you are with the NIST 800-171 implementation right now. So if you do have the gaps, you will input the date when you are going to complete implementation for all 110 practices. And also you will input the score based on the DoD assessment methodology.
So, okay, that's good. So basically, it gives the DoD, if I understand this correctly, kind of a high-level overview without getting too much into detail of where you stand with your NIST 800-171 self-assessment, how compliant you are with the controls, and then what is the length of time that you're estimating that it'll take you to remediate all of your gaps, all your deficiencies? Is that about correct?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that is correct.
Okay, good. I got that part. This is also tied, if you will, to DFARS 252-204-7020. That's a DFARS requirement that defense industrial base companies who handle CUI need to comply with. Is that also correct?
That is correct. And you have to follow the DoD assessment methodology, the NIST 800-171 DoD assessment methodology. That's where it specifies what you need to do to generate a score. And you have to have a system security plan and the POAM. If you do have any POAM, you need to create those documents. Once you have those information, you are complying with the DFARS 7020, and that's when you are ready to submit the score to the SPRS.
Great. Okay. So DFARS, it will abbreviate it and just call it 7020, right? But DFARS 7020 is also, if I understand it correctly, related to 7012 and 7019 as well, right? These kind of all play off of each other. Can we talk just a little bit about that, the requirements of 7012 and 7019 as well?
Yep. So DFARS 7012 is also based on the NIST 800-171. It also has the incident reporting requirements. DFARS 7012 is a little bit different from DFARS 7020 because DFARS 7012 is a requirement saying that you have to comply with NIST 800-171 if you handle the CUI. However, there's no verification process. You don't have to do anything. So that's why DoD created 7019 and 7020. 7019 is basically give you a notification saying if you handle CUI, you have to follow the DoD assessment methodology, the NIST 800-171 assessment methodology. And 7020 is showing that this is how you do the DoD assessment methodology, and you have to report. This is how you report to the DoD SPRS system.
Okay, and I think if I understand this right too, that one of the issues with DFARS 7012, right, the self-assessment methodology, was that even in the best of good faith efforts by defense industrial base companies, they just weren't able to accurately perform a self-assessment. Is that correct? And that the goal here was to be able to have some interim supervision, if you will, and for the DoD to be looking over the shoulder of the defense industrial base companies in this interim period before CMMC becomes final.
Right. When they have DoD 7012, there was never a accountability because 7012, the way it says in the regulation is that if you are not compliant, you have to let DoD know.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody let DoD know, so DoD assume everything is good until the DoD Inspector General find out a lot of defense contractors are not in compliance.
Right.
So DoD 7020 is a way, like you said, is an interim solution, a way for the defense contractors to input their score, tell DoD how well they are doing. DoD is going to hold the defense contractors accountable.
Right. Okay, good. That's good to know. And what is 7019? I know it's related to this as well, but it's not clear to me. What is 70 DFARS 252 204 7019? What's that about, Kyle?
So DFARS 7019 is a notification. Basically, is the DoD notifying the defense contractors that you have to do the NIST 800-171 DoD assessment methodology, mm-hmm. and you have to report the score to the SPRS system. So that is the notification piece. 7020 is the part that give you the instruction on how to actually do the reporting.
Good, very good. Okay, and just curious, when did these DFARS clauses become effective? Were they about at the same time, or were they spaced over time a little bit?
Yeah, so DFARS 7012 actually became effective in December 31st, 2017. Right. So that's very early. And DFARS 7019 and 7020 that became effective November 2020. In the meantime, CMMC is being worked on. We're expecting the CMMC to be coming out. Estimate is going to be July 2023. That's the estimate. We don't have that finalized yet.
Right. Okay. Okay, good. So this is the interim, sort of or falls under the interim rule, if I understand that right. We're kind of in a little bit of a holding pattern with CMMC until the final rulemaking comes out. That's about the size of it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, in terms of the actual submission into the SPRS under 7020, what is the information that companies need to submit there?
Yeah, the information you have to submit is the DoD assessment methodology score. You use the NIST 800-171 DoD assessment methodology and assess if you have the practices implemented or not. So based on the NIST 800-171 DoD assessment methodology, you will generate a score, and that is the score that you report on. On top of that, you have to report when you are going to complete all 110 practices. You also have to let the DoD know what is the scope. Is that based on the contract, based on the enclave, or based on the enterprise? So you just have to select one that actually fit your scope. And let them know the date when you are going to complete. And that's pretty much what you have to tell them.
Okay, good. Once this information is submitted into the SPRS, who has access to it? Is it just the DoD, or do the prime customers also have access to it as well?
Yeah, the only people have access to your SPRS record is DoD and yourself, the company that submit the SPRS information. DoD will make the information available only about if you have submitted to the SPRS system. They are not going to tell anyone other than you have submitted. So the score is not going to be available to anyone else, including your prime customers. All that information is all confidential. DoD will consider that as control and classified information, so they will not share it with anyone. Okay,
that's good. And I guess to piggyback right on top of that, we know from the subcontractors who have contacted us for help in this area, whether it's compliance or help with their SPRS submission, that they've been receiving these form letters that the primes have been sending out. And I'm assuming that that's because of their flow down requirements, right? If the primes need to be in compliance with 7012, 19, and 20, any of their subcontractors whom they contract with, they also have to meet these same requirements if they're sharing CUI. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely. So if the subcontractors, if they are not commercially off-the-shelf COTS vendor, yep, they will have to comply with all the flow down requirements.
Okay.
Yep. So that's why they are receiving all these letters.
Right. Good. And so that sort of begs the question, if they're getting these form type letters, what information should they actually be sharing?
I will recommend the subcontractors to tell the primes that they are in compliance with DFARS 7020 because they have submitted the information to SPRS system.
Okay, good. What information should they not share?
The primes will usually ask, they will push to say, what is your score? And they will push to ask you to share the System Security Plan, or SSP. And they will try, but I would suggest not to provide this information if you don't have to, because these are your proprietary confidential information. And all you have to really tell them is like, we are in compliance because we have submitted our information to SPRS system. The only exception is that you signed your contract with your prime contractor with a right to audit clause in there. The primes may have the right to audit your system, to look at your system security plan or your policy procedures. So that in that case, it will be different, but otherwise you don't have to share that information.
That's a good point. From the business perspective, I suppose the primes are the ones who are holding all the cards in this, right? And so, you know, if it's in the contract and you've signed it, you're going to have to provide the information or make yourself available for the audit. You just don't have any choice.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. I think a follow-up question to that would be, what if a defense industrial base subcontractor hasn't submitted to the SPRS yet? What would you recommend they do?
So if they have not submitted the SPRS system and that they do handle the CUI, the control unclassified information, at this point, they already have to follow the DFARS 7012, which already been in place since December 2017.
Right.
Right. So if you have not complied with the NIST 171, that means you are not in compliance with the DFARS 7012. And DFARS 7012 today, as of today, they are in pretty much all the contract that handle CUI. So technically, you are in violation right now, although they don't check the DFARS 7012 compliance right now. But technically, you are in violation. So you want to work on your NIST 171, work on your DFARS 7020 as soon as possible.
Right. Yeah. So basically, it's time to get going. Is really the advice there? It sounds like.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, and to that end, Kyle, we actually have a SPRS consulting package designed for defense industrial base companies who haven't gone through this exercise yet. Or maybe they've gone through it and they lack confidence in its accuracy and reliability. But basically, we conduct a series of interviews. We help do the NIST 800-171 self-assessment, develop the score that they need to be able to report to the SPRS web portal, develop a list of POAM items, and essentially give them everything they need to then be able to report, hey, we're now in compliance with DFARS 7012, 19, and 20. Yeah. So maybe we can talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we typically will start with scope, help the client to define the scope, because we we don't need to have the entire company in scope, right? We only need to focus on what systems are in scope. So we will help our clients go through CUI data lifecycle and also go through the data flow. So what we'll do is go through the input and creation of the CUI. So we understand when and how the CUI information get into the client's environment. So we will understand how the information get input, how does our client get the information, and how does our client create the information. And once you have the information, where does it store? How is it stored, right? And then get into the usage, understand how what application, what system, what users are using this CUI information, and sharing. How is the CUI getting shared to their subcontractors or sharing back to their prime contractors? And also, how is the CUI get archived or backed up, right? And where is that stored? Who's responsible for the backup? Is that in the cloud or on-prem? Right? And also, at the end, it will determine how is the data getting disposed or destroyed. So with this data lifecycle, we'll very clearly understand what system, what application, who actually have access, should be in scope. Then we can focus on the systems, applications, and departments, group of people. So that will help us really narrow down on the scope. So we want to keep the scope as small as possible, and that will help us determine the scope. Once we have the scope, we can start with the system security plan. We can walk through the 110 practices and only focus on the system and application in scope, right? And then we will, based on the gaps that we identify, we will create the POAM information, the gaps. And we will help our clients prioritize these gaps because they almost impossible to work on all the gaps all at once. So we'll help them prioritize. Yeah, so that's why we'll give them the scope, the SSP, the system security plan, and POAM, which is all to identify the gaps and help them create a priority so they can have a roadmap in terms of how to remediate these gaps.
That's great. It's a very practical package too, I might add, and it's one of high value. It's not one that we charge a lot of money for. It's a very affordable service. One point I'd like to interject here, Kyle, is, you talk about the importance of scope. And I think a lot of people hear that, and maybe initially I did as well. And you kind of think, yeah, the scope of my CUI. But it's really critically important. And I say that in the benefit of hindsight with some of the clients who we've worked with, who they didn't begin there. It's like they acquired a template, a NIST 800-171 self-assessment template, and started filling it out without really taking the time to identify their scope. And to your point, if you don't identify your scope, you may be mistakenly thinking that this is a company-wide exercise. And it doesn't need to be, right? The goal with what you said earlier is to try to minimize its footprint within your business organization. And why? Because it becomes a smaller exercise and a less costly compliance endeavor to be able to become compliant with NIST 800-171 and eventually with CMMC.
Yep, absolutely. So for example, so some company, as you mentioned, buy the template, then they start filling out, and they will assume everything in the company are in scope. But for example, the accounting, financial, and some of their CRM applications, they don't really have to be in scope. HR system, they may not need to be in scope. So if you don't have the CUI information in this type of system or applications, you don't need to make them in scope. So that's why we feel that it's very critical to understand the scope first. Once you know the scope, then you can focus your controls, the NIST 800-171, all 110 practices focus on the in-scope systems only.
Right. So the smaller the footprint, the less costly it is to become compliant with NIST 800-171 and eventually with CMMC.
Yep, it will give you a clarity in terms of what systems handle CUI. So, it will help you prepare yourself as well, so you don't get any confusion if the assessor comes to and ask you, where is your CUI? How do you handle the CUI? You have a very clear answer.
Right. And I think you alluded to this just a little bit earlier, but as we do these SPRS consulting engagements and you conduct these Zoom calls, we don't just have the folks from IT come along with these interviews, right? We also have the leaders from other divisions within the company, especially operations, but potentially HR as well, right? So, and the idea there is what? Because it seems that there's no one person or no one department within a company has a full understanding of how everybody works with the CUI information.
Right, exactly. So CUI input usually not handled by the IT. It could be handled by the procurement, could be handled by the engineers. It could be handled by somebody that in the business unit. They are non-IT. So IT really have to work with different departments to understand how the information get in. And also during the handling process, somebody might be storing the CUI information in the cloud somewhere that's outside of IT's control. IT probably want to know that as well. So it's better to get all the different group of people that handle the touch CUI in the same room to talk about the process during the scoping exercise. So as you mentioned, there are HR, legal, compliance, IT, InfoSec, if they are a different department, right? And also possibly the business unit, the head of the business unit, right? Procurement. And if the business continuity is different department, then you probably want to get that as well, because they may have the backup system somewhere else that you are not familiar with, right? So there could be different, if you're in the manufacturing, you want to include the QA, the quality control, the engineering. So there are different departments you want to include during the scoping exercise.
Okay. Good to know. And I'm glad you brought up the point about manufacturers, because they do sort of have that extra level to it, right? In terms of the production environment, the operational technology, possibly the IoT, and even the IIoT component absolutely. To their compliance program. Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay, good. How long does it usually take to complete this SPRS consulting offering?
I think it really depends on the size, your complexity as well. So it really depends. But if you don't have a complex environment, we can do this as little as 4 to 6 weeks. So we'll do the scoping and help you put together the system security plan, the SSP, and help you identify the POAM and help you put together the plan, action plan as well. So yeah, I will say it depends on the complexity, starting with 4 to 6 weeks. But obviously, if you have more cage code, more physical locations, and more subsidiaries that you have to work with, then these become more complex. So, and also the number of systems. If you have many complex systems in your environment, that will increase the timeline. Right.
And I think just a word of note here too, especially with manufacturers, right? And look, from a business perspective, we know that manufacturers for decades have had to make themselves very lean and mean to remain competitive. within manufacturing. And so quite often we deal with clients who are operating legacy systems, right? I know some of our clients are actually using systems that date back to the 1980s. How, just generally speaking, does this affect compliance for a defense industrial base company who's a manufacturer?
I think it all depends on the situation, but it's not too uncommon to see systems that are very old in the manufacturing environment.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but there are ways around it. So if there are systems that are very old, that are no longer being supported by Microsoft, for example, if you are using Windows 98, Windows XP, Windows 7 systems for your CNC machines or some of the manufacturing equipment, there are ways to secure them by putting them in a separate network, for example. So there are different ways that we can design the control to make it effective.
Great. Okay. And yeah, I really wanted to go down that avenue with you because it's pretty common with the manufacturing clients who we work with. So
yes. Yep.
Okay. Another question would be, how should defense industrial base companies who are subcontractors, how should they be responding to these prime customer request letters? I guess with a couple of assumptions there. If they haven't made any progress toward their SPRS submission, and then perhaps if they're at least in the process of it, how do you generally recommend that they would respond to these letters?
Yeah, so I know the prime contractors, they are following up with the subcontractors quite often these days, especially for the subcontractors that have not complied with the DFARS 7020 or have not submitted the score to the SPRS system.
Yeah.
So if you started it, it's better for you to just let your prime contractor know that you are working on it, you are in the process of getting the self-assessment done, and that you expect to get this SPRS submission done within the next few weeks, whatever that date may be. Right. And just want to communicate with prime contractors, make sure they're aware, then so you don't lose any contracts.
Right. And that seems to be the key. And like so many things in life or in business, it's about communication, just not remaining silent and ignoring it, just to respond and let your business partner know that you are working on it, that you have a plan in place to get up to speed with this stuff. And yep. I think the good news there is that, help is available, and, we might be able to get you where you need to be in 4 to 6 weeks, or not too much longer thereafter if you're a little bit larger and more sophisticated.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. Okay. So let's go to the next step. A company has made their submission. They're comfortable with their score. They have their POAM. What's next in this process for DoD cybersecurity compliance?
Yep. So once they have the POAM, they really want to start prioritizing, understanding what they need to do, what kind of resources they have, what kind of budget they have, how long the remediation is going to take based on the available resources they have, right? So these are going to be the roadmap for them to remediate, to work on towards the 110 practices for the NIST 800-171 or CMMC.
Right. Okay. And I think generally speaking, we usually tell people with the POAM period, right, to plan on taking about a year, because even within the IT department, they usually have their hands full with other work that they're doing on behalf of their company. So,
yep, usually will take a year or more, depends on the availability of the resources and also the budget. Right now, we're expecting July 2023. That's when the time going to be for the CMMC. But in the meantime, you want to just start planning ahead. So I don't expect everyone have to be compliant by July 2023, but you don't want to wait, and because it will take time for you to plan it out and also take time to work on the remediation.
Right. And the current draft form, correct me if I'm wrong, of CMMC 2.0 allows for some limited POAM items. Is that correct?
Some limited items, right? As long as they are not high risk, or assuming what I mean by high risk is based on the DoD assessment methodology, you should not have any items that's worth 5 points.
5 points. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. And, as a C3PAO candidate consulting firm, we offer consulting service help in this area with POAM remediation, right? So our tagline, if you will, is that we give folks as much or as little help as they need. And we recognize that a lot of companies like to try to do as much of the work as they can, as they're able to take on and do, to save money, but also because it helps them gain a more intimate understanding of what's involved with developing a DoD cybersecurity compliance program.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And if they want to do more, we can be their guide, we can be their advisor, provide the guidance. So give them homework, then we can check and provide the guidance in terms of how they are doing, and provide additional guidance if necessary.
Right. Okay, good. So let's just say, again, following along with that example, that we're working with a client and we're in the POAM remediation process in that phase of things. How do we generally go about making recommendations as to what items on their POAM list do they tackle first?
So we usually will recommend the priority based on the risk and the effort. So the higher risk items, meaning if there are items that have a worth of 5 points or 3 points in the DoD assessment methodology, these are considered high risk item, I would say. And if you have a high risk item with a low effort, you probably want to work on that first, because that will give you the biggest boost in your SPRS score. Then you work on the lower risk, low effort items, because you can knock off a lot of these items, the 1 point items. Once you are done with these low effort items, then you can estimate based on the effort, then you can work on the rest, the high risk or the low risk with a higher effort. And based on the effort, then you can prioritize. So these are something that we will help you prioritize, work with you, and based on our understanding of the risk and the gap that you have, and based on the availability of your resources, we'll give you a recommendation. Obviously, you can tweak it as you want, but initially we will give you a roadmap, help you prioritize, so you know what's ahead of you.
Right. Good. And I'd also point to the work that you've done in pulling together the best recommendations to help prevent cyber attacks, right? In the current environment of threats that we see today, certainly in the wake of, I shouldn't say in the wake, but in light of what's going on with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, cybersecurity breaches seem to be everywhere. They've become common household news items that we hear about in even the major news networks. And you've done the work to pull together the recommendations of the best practice recommendations of the White House, of the Department of Defense. Let me see, who else have we done? NSA, CISA, and the FBI. I think that might be the 5, but I'll put the link in to our website. But you've pulled together those best practice recommendations for people to follow, and that actually becomes part of your recommendation in terms of how do you go after those POAM items. What ones do you address first to help prevent cyber attacks, right?
Right, absolutely. Especially for some companies that are probably a little bit riskier, probably have a lower score on the SPRS score. they probably don't have a lot of security practices in place, which I will say they are a little bit more riskier, have a little bit higher risk of getting compromised by the cyber attackers. Right. So in that case, we are going to recommend what they have to do to protect themselves, secure their parameters. For example, look for the vulnerabilities first, right? Putting some vulnerabilities, scanning capabilities first to make sure that they are not compromised already, right? So we're going to put some recommendations to help them secure the parameter, help them protect themselves first. Once we have that secure parameter, we know we are working in the secure environment, then we can tackle all the rest of the remediation. But we don't want to start working on the less risky gaps, right? Knowing that we have not secured the parameter.
And that's such a practical approach to be able to tackle this. So that's terrific. It's great that you pulled all those sources together and made it so easy for folks.
And also CISA have worked with all the agencies that you mentioned. They issued the Shields Up alerts a couple months ago, which stated that defense industrial-based companies are increasingly under attack by the cyber attackers. So that is something that all the defense contractors have to be aware of, that cyber attackers, they are targeting the defense contractors.
Right. Great point. So continuing along, I think with this example, let's say we've been working with a client, helping them to tackle their POAM remediation items, and they're making progress and their score is going up. That initial submission to the SPRS, that's not cast in stone, right? At some point, it makes sense to go back and update your submission so that the DoD is able to see that you're making a good faith effort in tackling your POAM items and working to compliance?
Yes, yep, absolutely. So once in a while you want to go in and update your score, but I would say you probably don't need to go in too often. But if you have some major updates, right, if you get your score up 20, 30, 50 points, you probably want to go in and update your score. So showing that you have the progress, but every time you update the score, you will have the record showing that you're updating the score. So, you don't have to update, every other day, just update when you have the major progress.
Right. Okay. Good. Okay. All right, Kyle, well, I'll just wrap this up. I think this was terrific. First of all, it's a very good overview of the process, the DFARS requirements, and explaining what's involved, the time frame to be able to reach compliance if companies choose to work with us. And probably just finish by saying KLC Consulting, we are a cleared candidate C3PAO firm. This is our niche specialty. We help defense industrial-based companies become NIST 800-171 and CMMC compliant. And we do that by providing the most affordable combination of consulting services and technology solutions through some of our partner companies that are available today on the market. We have, among our resources, we have provisional assessors, and soon to be a provisional instructor. And Kyle, you're close, you're knocking on the door of that. You just need to hear back notification that you have clearance from the DoD, and which we anticipate and expect will be coming soon. But anyway, that's a little bit about us as well. So I'll just say thank you very much for your time today, Kyle, and hopefully people find this helpful.
Yeah, thank you.